Hey folks, this is the first episode of Esoteric Round Table, a new project I'm working on about bringing different voices, different people together from different esoteric traditions and perspectives. It initially started as a talk on Wesak, but it sort of branched off at a certain point into a number of other different topics like media and politics and spiritual energies affecting humanity besides just the Wesak festival. So, if you're interested, tune in, check it out, and leave a like if you enjoy. Welcome back, everybody, to Joshua's Magic, a channel about the intersection of the spiritual and the mundane. Today, we've got a panel discussion on the Wesak Festival. Today, we're being joined by Steve Chernikeeff. He's the founder of the Twelves movement. Hello, Steve.
Hi.
We've got Cyrus Ryan. He's the head or the director of the Northern School of Esoteric Wisdom.
Hello.
And we've got Danijela Ivelja Hill. Sorry, I'm bad with
Ivelja
pronunciation.
Hill, Danijela Ivelja Hill.
Yeah, and she is a disciple of the Ageless Wisdom. So thanks everybody for coming on, and
Thanks
I'll
for
get the
having
ball
us.
rolling. We're talking about the Wesak Festival, and for those of you who don't know, I'll just give a sort of initial explanation of it. It's this idea that the spiritual masters of wisdom, the planetary hierarchy, those who are sort of watching over humanity, gather once a year in Wesak Valley, which is, I think, the photo that Danielle is using, even though that's an AI version of it. And the Buddha, who has since moved to sort of higher spheres than those initiates and masters, comes back once a year, and to the assembled masses of the hierarchy, he pours out his blessing. And through them and the other disciples tuning in, that energy from Shambhala through the Buddha to the hierarchy is then distributed out to the world. And it's seen as the kind of the spiritual high point of the year in esoteric circles. So, any thoughts, any other explanations or addendums to add to that very basic understanding?
I think
That's
it's
good
worth,
basics.
yeah.
Most people won't go much deeper than that. There's a lot of mystery involved with Wesak. There's a concept or a given out somewhere by Blavatsky, I cannot remember, called the mistake of the Buddha.
Ah, yes.
And it is because of this mistake that he vowed to return, that the teaching that he gave out was too lofty for humanity, especially at that time, even though his students were, most of them were arhats, at least third initiation, fourth initiation. They were not ordinary, especially his closer disciples. And so his teaching was of a different nature, not for just regular humanity. Thus is considered, so says Blavatsky, as the mistake of the Buddha. Thus he returns as part of his vow. But that's just something I read. I can't verify that. But it's an interesting idea.
Mm.
So what I mean, you mentioned before in the sort of the green room, let's say, Steve or Stephen, sorry, that that there are different traditions on Wesak, right? Like there's some variation of how it's observed between the Theosophists and the Tibetans and maybe others.
And even different dates sometimes, yes. But as you know, most of us here follow the Bailey tradition of the full moon in May being the Wesak, where the Buddha comes back to the Wesak Valley and appears before the assembled masters and initiates and bestows his blessings upon our world. And this year is especially important Wesak because it's the 100-year conclave Wesak.
Yeah, there's actually I used to know an extremely good astrologer, and he explained it, Wesak and the Buddha, astrologically related to the eye of the bull in Taurus, which is a symbol of enlightenment, but I don't remember all of it. But there is also a astrological, how would you call it, matrix that's involved with this. It's a lot more than what meets the eye and even what's written.
Hmm. I remember hearing it said someplace that the Buddha was born in Taurus, he attained enlightenment in Taurus, and then he died in Taurus.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what the tradition is. Yeah.
Mm.
The other aspect, I don't know where I read, also probably Blavatsky, is that the Buddha maintains a second body on the inner planes that can be used, and he uses it when he returns because as he said to his, or he asked his cousin Ananda during one of his talks, he said, Ananda, do you see the Buddha? And Ananda replied, yes, I saw the Buddha walked into the room, the Buddha sat down, and now the Buddha is giving a discourse. And the Buddha answered, no, Ananda, you do not see the Buddha. So the Buddha is not his body, but he maintains a body that's been used by other initiates over the last couple of thousand years on the inner planes, and that he uses that body to return during the Wesak ceremony or ritual. Supposedly, Tsongkhapa, who was a big redeemer or changed Tibetan Buddhism, used the body of the Buddha. He's also a great being. There's a lot of mysteries with these great beings. They can use different kind of bodies.
What was his name? Sangapa?
Tsongkhapa. So around
Sangkapa.
the 14th, 15th century, I
And
forget.
he was a physically incarnated person.
Oh yeah. He's historical. He transformed. He began what's called the Galupa in Tibetan. Previous to that was what is it, Marpa with the Kargyupa, and that was around 1050, and then much later he what's it called when you there's a term not like a reformer. He
Oh,
things were becoming corrupt, and he came in and he gave out what's called the Lam Rim, which are the rules, or the monastic rules, and it's the Dalai Lamas that come from Tsongkhapa, from his disciple, one of his two disciples, I forget. Their names, some of them are more difficult, but so the Galupa, like the present Dalai Lama, is a Galupa. The rules and everything were started by Tsongkhapa.
Probably the
so
last Dalai Lama.
what's that?
Pardon?
Probably
This
the last
particular one.
Dalai Lama.
Yeah, he doesn't want it to continue, so I've read.
And also the Chinese who administer Tibet won't allow the normal tradition to continue.
Yes, yeah.
So that's
So,
extremely important point. If he's the last one,
yeah, yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
Because yeah, it has an esoteric impact and obviously very significant.
Mm.
And he's a hard worker. I met him a couple of times. Took part in one of his Kala Chakra initiations 20 years ago or something. He's been to Toronto a couple of times, and I knew a bunch of his monks from the Nalanda monastery, which Nalanda monastery are the monks of the Dalai Lama.
I would like to add something. My background also includes pranic healing. And in pranic healing, one of the things we've been told is that Lama Tsongkhapa, that's the same, I guess I pronounce it slightly differently, is one of the reincarnations of St. Francis of Assisi, who later on became Master Kutumi. So that's what we are told, in pranic healing. It might be completely wrong, but that would be the lineage, the second ray lineage, possibly.
I doubt that, but Tsongkhapa is a great, great being, much more than St. Francis, but you never know.
And interestingly, the late Pope took his name from Francis of Assisi, of course.
Yes.
This is an aside, but I don't know there's any significant connection, of course. I just make that comment.
Yeah,
So we could say that the Pope Francis is actually interested in Kuthumi. If we accepted Kuthumi was Francis, it's a stretch. It's a stretch.
Yes.
I know.
the
For sure.
stretch.
Just a little esoteric humor.
So what this energy that the Buddha pours out, what understanding do you have about the purpose and the nature of that?
As far as I can see, it's the continuum of light, and it's a very brief touch upon the earth again, isn't it? They say it's 8 minutes or something like that. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know if that's
Yeah, there's
entirely
the
accurate.
approach where the Buddha's supposedly approaching the valley, and then the pouring out of the blessing, and then the moving away, and I think that all takes place within 8 minutes.
Yeah, but as from an esoteric point of view, it's much more about energy, isn't it, rather than trying to formulate the Buddha being a being or a person coming and touching the earth. For me, it's a representation of the energy of beyond Shambhala coming and touching the earth, and
It's
the
like
Buddha is a representative of that.
Yeah. He's a transformer, or
Yes.
channels in this very high energy, which then will go through Lord Maitreya and be brought down through the masters, sort of like a transformer does outside of your house. And so that the electricity that comes into the house will be not too strong. You don't blow all the fuses and everything. It has to be, I'm not
It steps it down.
electrical, but step down. Thank you. So it's step down. So there's a whole process in the Wesak Valley, from my understanding, of stepping down. Right? So, for instance, an accepted disciple who knows how to tune in to the Wesak will receive a different level of the Shakti, the energy, than, say, a probationer that's just learning.
Yes.
So it's step down, step down, step down. Right? If we were to take the full blast, let's call it, of the Buddha, it probably, would fry us.
Buddha blast.
Yeah, Buddha blast.
And that's throughout the human condition, is that we, according to our ability, can receive energy, of course.
Also has a lot to do with our bodies, the coarseness, quality of the body. Certain other races have a more subtle physical body versus a Caucasian that has a very coarse body, being a newer race also. And so is more difficult. But a lot of the Caucasians now have, I like to call it, more Eastern souls, and thus are attracted to this. But it takes time in order to align to this particular energy. Everybody will experience it differently, and it's a good thing for anybody who tries. It's helpful for humanity and helpful for the individual.
So speaking of tuning into it, what would you folks say about how somebody would go about tuning into it if they're interested, or maybe if they're just hearing about it now for the first time?
I'm sure everybody has different ways. I've been doing, this will be my 50th Wesak. I'm not young as I look.
Happy 50th,
Ella.
Cyrus.
Steven's young too, so he looks very young. So this would be my 50th Wesak. And And my teacher started us preparing for Wesak generally as soon as the sun moves northward in Capricorn. And we prepare for 6 months because Wesak for us was New Year's, and that you refurbish this, how do you call it, or regenerate the batteries, so to speak, of your soul each Wesak to last throughout the entire year. So maybe we're a little bit more extreme in our efforts. If you read my first book, I gave quite a few examples of what we did. And during Wesak, we usually would go on retreat for about 5 days. This year, I'm only going for 3 days. But I've been preparing, and certain members of the group that go with me have been preparing for quite some time. And through that, one is chanting the mantra of Gautama, Lord Gautama, to prepare and take part in the ritual that goes on in that sacred valley. There's quite a lot of things you can do, but that's just a very brief idea. But that's how I've been taught. My teacher had his awakening when he was 16 in Borobudur in Indonesia, but he's Asian. So Wesak was always very important.
What about you, Stephen? Daniela?
Well, I believe, is it Alice Bailey that says that the masters also prepare for 6 months at least on the inner levels. Also, again, my biggest, before I joined the 12s, my first contact with something like this in this lifetime was through pranic healing. And they really emphasize purifications on all levels, purifying your body through diet, trying to be as close to vegetarianism as possible. And also purifications of building the character, removing the weaknesses, working on the weaknesses. I guess that would be dweller on the threshold, I would say. And for 6 months. And then if you're really hardcore and you want to do it, to the best of your potential, you would do the water fast 2 days before the day of the Wesak and 2 days after. So 2 days of the preparation for the full moon, the moment of the energy coming in, and then 2 days of distribution. And they're always emphasizing the importance of the group work, particularly because it can be too much for an individual, especially if somebody is not prepared well enough. So group will kind of balance things out. That's the hope.
Yes. Groups enable us to receive the energy more purely and in greater strength. They say that a coordinated group of disciples could increase the energy thousands of fold. And it's a stepping down process, isn't it, from Shambhala via hierarchy, via the new group of world servers into humanity, through humanity into the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, and mineral kingdom. So it's a stepping down process is continually. And Wesak is known to be one of the great shambhalic impacts, they call them. They happen rarely. And this Wesak is the 100-year shambhalic impact of the conclave of the hierarchy. And so that's why it's a particularly special Wesak. Alice Bailey mentions 2025 16 times in her books.
Good count.
And that's not...
I have no idea.
Yeah, I've counted, yes.
Yeah, you did, definitely. It's good to know, though, Stephen. Thank you.
And
in case anybody ever asked me that.
And when you think about it, that Alice Bailey was talking about this in 1925. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, to be accurate, 1918 onwards, but certainly 1925, she mentioned the next next 100-year conclave in 2025. And that's when she published her magnum opus, of course, Treatise on Cosmic Fire in 1925, in 2 volumes. A little bit of trivia there for you.
Yes.
It was first published in 2 volumes.
You probably have the original one, if I know you.
I do. Yes.
Mine's falling apart, and I had to get I got 2 hardcover ones. One I took to India, and just carrying it around India didn't do it well back in 1970 something. But
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I've been to India many times. I lived there a year as well.
yeah, so did I in 1980. But you live very close, so you could hop over in a couple of minutes from where you live.
Well, I wasn't living in in Thailand then. I was living in
No.
London.
Yes, but I'm saying now.
Oh, now, yes, yes. Well, I've been, 20 odd times now.
Yeah.
Love India.
I'm going September 15th, give or take, for a little while. So
Oh,
again,
lovely.
I was there
Yeah.
3 years ago for 2 months. It's my
Great. Yes,
second
I
home.
saw that. Yes, I saw that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, being a significant year, that we can expect a number of changes to come on, and we don't know exactly what they are, but a lot of things came out of the last hierarchical conclave in 1925. In
Right.
fact, I recently found out that the spiritual group that I'm a part of called Subud, that the founder of that had his experience in 1925, I think in like maybe September or something like that. So it's interesting to see these kind of outpourings of the energies taking root in reality.
The future has taken root in the present.
It's important that humanity responds appropriately. I mean, we have these issues in the world today because of the shambolic impact, not the other way round, which some people misinterpret in my view. So
How do you mean?
the shambolic, the energy comes in, and then you have this disturbance in the world because the humanity is not dealing with it correctly.
Mhm.
Humanity is ready to deal with it. That's part of the problem.
And then you've got the Ukraine
problem.
conflict, the Gaza thing, and you've got the COVID thing, and all these things, from my point of view, are all demonstrations of humanity's inability to reach out to Godhead, so to speak, to use a Hindu term, or to the universe appropriately.
I don't think
And
humanity's ready yet, Stephen. Not to argue with, but humanity still has. If you look, we're coming supposedly into the beginning of the Aquarian age. And if you take a look at the symbol for Aquarius, what is it? The jagged two lightning, however you describe it, doesn't look harmonious. It looks up and down, up and down. So there's going to be a lot of shaking up, especially in the first few hundred years. It's going to be rough. The Aquarian age lasts for 2,500 and some odd years, or 2,500 and some odd. So somewhere maybe after 500, 600, 700 years, things will start to settle down a bit. But with this, as Stephen is saying about the shambolic energy, it is very disruptive.
yes, it
And
is.
there are some very disruptive forces occurring throughout the world. And they come cyclically and they have great impacts. And if you look, Alice Bailey actually started writing before the conclave, bringing out the newer teaching, Letters in Occult Meditation, and what is it? The Initiation Human and Solar,
Yeah.
which are around 1919, still quite a few years. So presently, there are things being formatted of the new teaching already, but it's not ready for humanity. It stays within the ashram until the right timing. I'd say it's already there, but maybe another 10 or so many years as these young advanced beings who are already around mature and sort of get their wings and start to make active impacts. But they are already working, and they're in physical incarnation throughout with certain inner ashrams. But what they can do is not allowed outside the ashram yet. And they're very aware of the conclave, which I know this, you may not like this, it happened already several weeks back. It's not during Wesak, as that is not the correct timing, because the Wesak energy can't have split with something else. The conclave happened before, and then you have Wesak.
When is your understanding about when it happened?
I'm not going to share that. It was just a while back.
Okay.
Is the conclave like a one-time event, or it's like a gathering that happens throughout 2025?
It's a one-time.
So technically,
Yeah.
the decision about the reappearance and how is it going to happen has already been made then.
Could be. It would be all
if you pay
astrological.
careful attention to what the Tibetan said, he said the decision about that will likely be made. So he didn't even say definitely that it would be made.
Yeah, I can't say. Who am I? I don't want to become like, what's his face, that guy from Cher that I was saying, oh, Maitriya's here, Maitriya's there.
Benjamin Krim,
Yeah, it's a nonsense, looking for the glamour of notoriety, once. So I'm the one. I'm the what is it? The one who talks about it, the forerunner. He wants fame. That's basically it.
yeah. I
When
see
it
it slightly
happens,
differently.
hopefully we know.
I see it slightly differently than that. I think the conclave is a year-long process. It's a continuum in 2025, and I think it does culminate on the 12th of May. But we just have
My
to agree to.
knowledge is a bit different, but that's fine.
Yeah, that's okay. We can differ on that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good
so-
to have on different perspective so people need to exercise their own discrimination of what they think makes sense or what's true or not.
For sure.
Yeah. So, but the fact is, this year, let's not get hung up on dates. The conclave is happening, and it is a shambolic impact. And I view the energy coming in and being disturbing, but I see it slightly differently. I think that it's because humanity has not learnt to deal with that energy. And you go back to your metaphor of the transformer, if the transformer is not ready and not purified and can deal with the energy, then chaos will ensue. And I think that DK made it clear. He actually made several prophecies which have not happened, not come true. But let's be clear about that and honest about that. Mm-hmm. Throughout his books, he's made many prophecies that by the year 2025, this and this and this will happen, and it hasn't. Right. And we have to ask ourselves why that is. And humanity has not responded correctly, in my opinion, to those incoming energies, and that's why we've got the chaos today. And DK made it quite clear that if we didn't learn and understand the three recognitions, that it's possible that the same thing will happen to our world as happened to Atlantis, and it will be destroyed. He made that very clear.
Oh, sorry, Stephen, I thought you were done. I know there's some old traditions of what they call failed evolutions. Not everything becomes successful. Tibetan master I agree with what Stephen's saying totally, that a lot of these prophecies, there's also in White Magic, I believe, if you guys can correct me, where he says after 1980, the Master Jesus would take over the Catholic Church. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
That never happened.
Well, I think I have something to add on that. J.J. Dewey wrote an article or a series of articles, or maybe it was just posts, but he was kind of putting that together, and I'll just sort of rehash it because since you bring it up. But that symbol, the LUX symbol with the triangle that's on the Bailey books, had several different meanings. But part of it, if you overlay it on the the chart of the masters in the hierarchy, one of those, it points to a certain master. And he was saying that it was actually the master Jesus, and that was part of the intention of that, to get people's attention focused on that plan with the 1980s. And actually, the Pope who took over, I think his name was it was John Paul I. Yeah, he actually was behaving a lot different than most popes. Like, he didn't want all the pomp and circumstance. I think he didn't want them to carry, they carry the Pope like on a throne up to his coronation. He didn't want that. But he was likely poisoned and killed. And so the idea, the theory anyway, is that the Master Jesus was actually meant to overshadow him, but he was killed before that could happen. So that was another plan that seemingly didn't come to proper fruition.
Well, logically, if that was the case, they would know that in advance, wouldn't they?
Yeah, you'd figure, but there might have been.
I think it's a bit of a long shot, that one.
Yes, a lot of long shots.
Yeah, I mean,
people just hoping
destined to become Jesus, and they couldn't foresee that he was going to be poisoned. I think that's unlikely, isn't it?
Well, it also might have been that he hadn't built the connection to enough strength at that point or something. I don't know. Just the thought.
Well,
I think that's still probably the plan, that Master Jesus will take over the churches. I think that's the plan as per Alice Bailey. It's just the timelines have moved. I think Master DK gave the most optimistic timeline in his books, if everything works out perfectly.
he did, yes.
But for the masters, what's another 100 or 200 years or 500 years? For them, that's not a big deal. For us, it's huge for our little lives.
Well, you can even. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
And another thing that I would like to point, Stephen and Cyrus and Joshua, what do you think? Everybody's saying humanity is not responding, which is true to a degree, although there are changes in humanity. But what is the role of the disciples? I know, Stephen, you always kind of mention that. What could disciples in the world, and apparently many are being incarnated at this point, what can they do?
Well, I think that's a good point. And I think the first thing I'd say is, DK was clear about this as well. The reason that the avatar of love, or Christ, has not been able to reappear is totally down to disciples, not the masses of human beings. He said that. And what he meant by that was the inertia within the White Lodge of disciples is far greater than in the Black Lodge. The Black Lodge is far better organized than the White Lodge, unfortunately. They've got their act together. They've got the misinformation of the mainstream media pumping out nonsense every day. They've managed to infiltrate everything, pharma, everything you can think about. They've infiltrated, and they've been extremely successful. Whereas I would say, probably controversially, the disciples have not been successful hardly at all, because most of them, as far as I can see, in my observation, most of them are sleeping. I mean, I've had debates with disciples about this for years, and many of them will say to me, "You're completely wrong, Stephen. We don't have to do anything. The plan is already there. It will all work out in its own way. Why are you talking like that? We don't have to do anything. The plan is unfolding before us. The battle of light has been won," they say. And I look at them in despair, these people, despair. Tears rolling down my cheeks, Joshua, about this. It's really, really, honestly, I mean, I'd like to slap them, to be honest with you. Wake up. It's not your job to sit there and just say, "Oh, well, as they say in Thailand, mai pen lai," which means, "Oh, never mind." It will happen anyway, because it's not true. Disciples actually have to consciously work at it. And that's why I believe the biggest advancement of Lucis Trust has been the triangle work. I believe that is their greatest achievement, and probably saved humanity in many ways from destruction. Because within group work, from a group of 3 people upwards, that is where the transformation takes place, and the the metaphor that Cyrus used about the transformer comes into play. But disciples are the thing that's going to slow down the externalization of the hierarchy. Because
Or
they're the
speed
ones
it
who
up if
have
they're already
they have the
slowing it
knowledge.
down.
They have the knowledge, but they don't do anything. Most of them, not all of them. We do. Us four here are not included in that, but many of them don't actually do anything. And DK was hoping in his teachings that the disciples, supposed to be here in their millions by 2025, right, would get their act together, invoke the hierarchy, and peace would transform onto the earth, and Christ would reappear.
I don't think
But
there are millions.
that's what he
Did he
said.
say that somewhere?
Yeah, he did, yeah.
Oh, I think that's another prophecy that's not coming true.
Yeah.
Well, there's many,
I think
many of his,
there
Well,
are
if they're sleeping, you know.
there are
Maybe.
that's
very
right. They're
few
sleeping. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
real disciples are very few.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I think
Wishful thinking disciples there are many, but actual disciples are very few. And those that are actually in contact, direct contact with an inner ashram or the hierarchy are even fewer. There are many who are applying to be disciples, but are not yet. And as sort of Stephen says, that many of them have this sort of laissez-faire attitude, that it's just happening, they don't have to do anything. And there are a lot of spiritual teachers that reinforce that out there, but they're more Piscean in their concepts. But so many people still follow that Piscean model. There are not that many real groups that are out there.
Yeah.
No, that's right.
Functioning on the physical plane even. There are very few, which is very unfortunate. There's still a lot of gurus. My teacher used to call them Q gurus, Q for quacks, or to use the Tibetan master from, what is it, Hercules, Busiris.
No, yeah.
A lot of deceivers of the soul that are out there. And they say good words, they have knowledge, a certain type of knowledge with words, and they easily capture with their good words the interests of many people, and that actually prevents people from being more active. But that's the time.
Platitudinous.
I'm sorry, what, Stephen?
Platitudinous words.
Yes, you're correct.
I read them daily, unfortunately, all over the internet on very well respected pages, and they'll say something that is nothing.
Exactly.
A few words about
Everything
the
is
light
nothing,
coming
Stephen.
in. Sorry?
I said everything is nothing, Stephen.
No, you're being like Krishnamurti there. Be careful.
Yes.
But the fact is, one big demonstration for me of the lack of application of the esoteric teachings in the new group of world servers is the lack of combinations and organizations of the groups that we have. You know, I mean, we're supposed to be, and I've said this for decades, we're supposed to be the new group of world servers, but you'll have over there the Lucis Trust, over there the Agni Yoga group, and they don't even get together.
Somebody froze. He froze.
The connection must have crapped out for a second there, Cyrus.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't have the cooperation that the new group of world servers teaches that we should have.
Well, and that's because I think largely there's too much, and I'm sure I'm guilty of this too, but there's too much focus on the form aspect, right? These teachings say this, and I have to do this and meditate like this, and maybe eat this or that, whatever. And there's less emphasis on the synthetic thing that can unite those things, even if this group's doing things this way, this group's doing things that way. And if you're really focused on the essence of it more, you could connect in some way. And there has to be a desire to do it too, right? Because if you're just not interested and it's, oh well, they're doing their thing and we're doing the thing we're supposed to do over here.
But there's some things that we can agree on, though, Joshua, aren't there? We agree on using the Great Invocation, for example, right? We agree that the hierarchy is there. We agree on karma. We agree on life after death. We agree on rebirth, you know, all these things. So there's a mass of information. If we set aside the noise, there's a lot that we can agree on, isn't there? But they still mostly, not all of them, but mostly refuse to cooperate, as DK has taught us, in the way that the New Group of World Service was built to facilitate. The New Group of World Service is not an organization, as DK has told us 100 times. That is the plane on which we can cooperate together. So if we have all these common denominators that we all agree in being good people, we all agree in invocation of the light and all this, why aren't we doing it?
But people don't know what to do. That's part of it. Also, part of the transformation of humanity is done through esoteric means, through the destruction of thought forms that imprison humanity. And there are certain advanced initiates who work very hard to try and break down these negative thought forms. But even if, going back to decay, the World War, through the destructive aspect, as he mentions in one book, of even the bombs and which seems very negative, but broke down many ancient thought forms. And he said that was very strong. Now, for
And the
instance,
act of the war too, in Europe and other places, how did he put it? The prolonged sound that issued forth broke up so much of what was entrenched in Europe in particular.
I'll share with you, I don't think I put it in my books. Anyways, my teacher, when he was in Egypt, I've been to Egypt a couple of times, but he was in Egypt, he got a vision. And in the vision, he saw that all the ancient negative magic of the Middle East was still active on the lower astral plane. But with the Islam that came in, because they don't believe in it, and through their chanting of Halil, Allah, whatever, helped to contain it to a certain extent. Because of the disbelief, it didn't have a channel, but it breaks out every once in a while, and that's why there's always this unsettledness in the Middle Eastern war, is through these old magical thought forms that are there. I remember I was walking in, what is it, in Thebes, in Karnak, which is a huge temple complex that was built over hundreds and hundreds of years in ancient Egypt. And I'd be walking along normal, and then all of a sudden, just walking as if I passed through a seal of some sort, there was a change in the atmosphere. Something was still there, still active. You could sense it, and then you walk out of it. So had some other experiences there of certain types of forces that are still very active. They're very negative, very powerful, especially around the pyramids in Giza and the Valley of the Kings. There's a lot of magic there. Probably other areas too, but I've been there several times. So there was also something related to how many wars have been in the area of the Ukraine, going back through the times of the Moguls coming across and through. If you read Mabel Collins, The Blossom and the Fruit, I don't know if any of you, she wrote this story, as she said at some point, it could be true or not. It's a story of initiation, but about one of the wars that occurs in the story. But then after the war, she describes in India, they call them bhutas, the elemental forces that are active over the war, what do you call it, the battlefield, after, you got all the corpses and everything. It gives some idea of these forces that are around, that people don't have any idea that even exist. But in Egypt, they're very powerful. India is very different. There are forces there, but India, because for centuries they've chanted bhajans and mantras, keeps it, everything has a much more, not as negative an effect. There are, of course, negative effects, and Tibet also. So these things happen all over the world. Um, and that's what drives so many things. And people are driven and held bondage by these ancient thought forms. Um, I know, Danielle, you said
Croatia,
Croatia. So I
Yugoslavia,
know when driving through Austria, through going to, I forget, it was so long.
Slovenia, probably.
Pardon me?
Slovenia.
Yeah, something long time. When you're going through the mountains, they have these mountain passes, modern highways. But every once in a while, there's a little altar, like a little shrine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. These shrines are to hold down some of these forces that are there. I have actually seen these forces cause accidents.
Hmm.
You think it's something, for instance, I know this is way off topic, Joshua, so if you want to edit it out.
No, no, no. We like off topic. It's more
Okay.
freewheeling. We'll
So
get
I
back
was
to
driving
WESAC
along on a
eventually.
very dark November night, afternoon, but it was very dark. I had my lights on, and I'm a car length, a little bit more than a car length behind another car, um, on a highway. Along comes a little tiny car and shoves it for no reason. They have an open lane, shove themselves right in between me and this other car. I had to just touch my brakes, but I hit some black ice and the car started spinning on this is a about 10 lane super highway. My first thought was I'm going to get smacked. There's going to be, right? But for some reason, there was a strange feeling like I was floating. And as the car spun and faced the opposite way, the oncoming traffic was way away, blinked my lights, and was able to turn around. But I was with an individual from who I worked with who was not spiritual, right? I had already been meditating for quite a number of years. And they said, that was the strangest thing. I felt like time stopped and we were floating and you're being protected. I said, well, that's pretty cool. Yes. But that individual coming in was an attack, right? A force. The person's unconscious, just try, oh, it seems natural, but it's another force impacting. Thus, a more divine force was protecting me. But most people just see an idiot driver, let's swear at him and whatever. But no, it's an event. Thus, there are with peoples and countries, there are events that occur through these different higher forces. And as Stephen was talking about this shambolic force causing all this disruption, these forces impact on the higher devas, lower devas, through to the elementals who are driven to cause uh, people's actions. People don't know it. I always like what Gurdjieff called it food for the moon. So the lunar petries become overactive. Thus, again, as Stephen was talking about, that humanity is not, what did you call it, reaching up to their potential is because of all this, and that humanity is not yet gone beyond the hypnotism of the lower or the lunar petries. And
Interesting.
you see, especially at big games, big sporting events, or what is it, uh, concerts. Especially what's one of the things that are used by the left-hand path is this deep bass riff in modern music. You go into a restaurant, and you hear the boom, boom, boom. Some of the music, they probably not in Thailand, but throughout Canada and United States, Applebee's and all those kind of places, right? They have this music, this undertone of this techno rock or something. What would you call it? Right? And that beat helps to hypnotize, right? They say, well, it's to make people move faster so you get more seatings in the restaurant. But that's also the Dark Brotherhood, or I call them LHP, who know how to manipulate humanity. And they do it through the lower chakras, especially the Svadhisthana chakra, through music, drugs, fashion, etc., and the media, of course.
Yeah.
That's what
Media's
hypnotizes us, right? We want to look good.
Media's one of the biggest problems in the world today, in my opinion, because it's all about opinion. There's no news anymore. If you watch a particular channel, you're going to get a particular political point of view. There's very little free news, free of political bias these days. Media is giving opinions all the time when they report on something. I mean, the Ukraine war is one of the obvious ones, and Gaza is another one, of course.
Well, and the reporting is seemingly less and less actual investigative reporting where, they send somebody there or they dig through things. They just take official sources say this and then they report it. So
Well, no, with the Canadian broadcasting, and they show there's our guy in Gaza, and you see all the rubble all around him and stuff. I don't know. I think there are some, I hope, maybe I'm being hopeful, that some of the reporting or the BBC or something are more direct, where they're not like Fox News or some of the others. I know CNN could be good, but then they always have these different
Oh, I'd have to
authority
disagree.
guys. They
I'd
come
have to
and they
disagree.
discuss.
I'd have to disagree with you there. I think the BBC is one of the most appalling examples
I haven't watched them, but I always thought they
bias
generally had
I've
it.
ever seen. And CNN, I just can't bear to even look at the screen of CNN, let alone listen to their drivel. The point is, even in the Second World War and other wars and other things, news channels would send out reporters on both sides, for example. Yeah. Now in the Ukraine war, nearly I would say 95% of the reporting is all Ukraine based. It's all nobody ever goes to the Russian side and says, "What's your view?"
The
What
Russians
they actually
mightn't allow it though. That's the problem.
Oh, I think they do. There are reporters in Moscow. In some of the internet reporters are there. But the other reporters though, Cyrus, from the big, I'm talking about MSM being the big main ones. ABC News and all those, and CNN and all those, and Fox as well. They don't report the other side. They report one side. And you'll have the reporter there on the Ukraine front lines saying, "Oh, and here we are. They've just bombed this hospital, the terrible Russians." But nobody's on the Russian side saying, here's a Ukraine bombing in Kursk, killing the kids in the hospital." You don't get it. You get one side only. And that's part of the problems, and that's part of the left-hand path's manipulation of human beings by giving them one side of the story. So we have on the Gaza conflict, the terrible, evil Gaza conflict, just the reporting about how basically good the Israelis are. It's all to do with the terrible Palestinians who've done these things. And then on the Ukraine side, you've got another view. You've got how terrible the Russians are and how great the Ukrainians are. And so for me, I'd like to have a balance, and I think that is part of the problem with the world today, is that we don't have the Walter Klondikes of the world who actually just give you the news.
I think there is something very positive happening in the world, and that is that the actual viewership of all those legacy, they call them legacy or mainstream media, is so down. I mean,
Yes.
MSNBC gets 200,000 people, while you have these bloggers. I don't want to name them, but I mean not bloggers, but people who are running podcasts, and we all heard of them: Joe Rogan,
Yes,
Dave
yes.
Smith, Candace Owen. There are so many who
Yeah,
get
like Joe Rogan
millions.
gets more ratings than everything on CNN combined or something like that.
It
Yeah,
does,
the
yes.
millions and millions and millions, and they are really uncensored. They're not bought. Many of them actually, the public is recognizing when somebody is giving them information and when somebody is being backed up, and you can really see that unraveling now. How some of these rising stars, and then they discover, oh, they're being backed up by this or that lobby, and they sink. So I think we live in a really revolutionary times when it comes to the amount of information that's free out there. That's why
But
they tried to ban TikTok in the United States. It it killed all the legacy media.
legacy media is dying. There's no question about that.
But now they're
Partially,
coming up with the alternative mainstream media, like trying to control the mainstream. So they're creating their own. I get the left path, but we live in great times when people will have to use their discernment, which is one of the goals of the evolution. Very interesting times. So,
for sure. Far
I've,
from
I've
Wesak.
always, yeah, I mean, I've always banged the drum, as you know, Daniela, on political neutrality. I am not a fan of taking any sides in elections yet, disappointingly, a lot of our colleagues in the New Age esoteric movement do take sides. And actually, one very large and very well-known organization that you probably know and love held meditations for Biden and for Harris. Now that to me is almost black magic. I don't think our genre should be doing anything like that. What we should be doing is invoking the good and the light and the love and the compassion wherever it is found.
correct. Yes.
On the other hand, if you sense something is very incorrect and you have your own choice to make whether it's right or not, then if you feel that a particular politician, so for instance, prior to the Second World War, there were a group of disciples. I try and remember their name. They're quite some
Aldous
are quite
Huxley and
famous. Uh,
wasn't it Aldous Huxley and some other people?
yeah, Aldous Huxley and a few others. But one of them, where can I see his name? He's a really good writer. He wrote about Ramakrishna and Vedanta, and there was a whole group of them. And they tried just almost the same situation that Stephen's mentioning, meditating to change Hitler, right? And the Tibetan master does say that that was a battle between light and the dark. And he even chastised theosophists for not being active in that. So if you feel that something is the nature very dark, tyrant, what have you, I don't say meditating and sending them love or whatnot. To me, that's nonsense. But if there's ways that you can help, whether you donate money or what have you, I think that's is fine. I'm not political at all, but if I sense there were darkness or something, right? I'm not an American, so I'm not involved in what's going on in the United States. And Canada is never very dark. It has its ups and downs, but everything is much different in Canada and the US. There's a different David force over the US than there is in Canada.
Yeah.
So it's quite different.
I think the Hitler situation is a different situation entirely, and I think it's a false equivalency.
I'm not making an equivalent, I'm just giving as an example. And at that time that they were doing this was before the war, so Hitler wasn't at his worst yet. It was an interesting thing. There was some reporter that met Hitler, and this reporter must have been somewhat sensitive. I don't know, I can't remember. I read it a long time, but he sensed that there was a power flowing through Hitler and that Hitler wasn't himself. There was this power flowing through him. Then he met Hitler again much later, And he said that power was gone. And that's near when Hitler had lost control sometime after 1941, 42. That was a very interesting observation.
But the problem is, I, I listen to all of that and I accept that, but the problem is not that. The problem is that the left have used the language of Hitler against Trump, for example, who I'm not a particular supporter of. But the left have called Trump Hitler.
Yes, well, that's just
And
how things work.
it's an absurdity. Trump has not killed 3 million Jews. It's an absurdity, you know. Now,
Well,
I don't.
even more broadly than that, the justification for most of the wars we keep getting in are, harkening back to World War II. Like, we got to stop this guy before he becomes Hitler. And so
Yes.
World War II has become a very useful thing to weaponize to get us to do things that we don't need to keep doing for the most part.
A part
Yes.
of that has to do with,
Go on.
after the First World War, the war to end all wars. It didn't end all wars.
Well, the First World War was called that.
Yes.
The First World War. Yeah. But,
Yes.
but my point actually is when I mention it, is not to appear to be supporting Trump, because I don't particularly like him and I think he's an egomaniac. It's not about that. My point is, as esotericists, we should not take sides, because we should be looking up, not down. And I have this argument with a lot of people, and they don't like me for it, but I don't really care.
No, that's
The
fine.
point is, esotericists, if we're looking towards the externalization of the hierarchy and Wesak, which is what this stream is about, and everything else, is that we should be focusing on the light and do what Krishnamurti said. Krishnamurti said that God was like the sun and it shines on everybody equally. And that is exactly how I see it. Shines on Trump, shines on Biden, shines on Putin, shines on Netanyahu. Now, whether we like those people or not is not the point. The point is we should focus on the light. And of course, we should call out evil when we see it. There's no question about that. I call it out all the time. I think what the Israelis are doing to the Gazans is evil. We call it out. But as esotericists, though, we are better spending our energy and our spiritual capital on trying to enhance the externalization of the hierarchy, rather than worrying about the effects. Because I see Trump as like the destroyer, in the Hindu, Ramayana, he's the destroyer aspect. So it's not really about him. It's about the energy. And he's just displaying this energy of the destroyer. Not just him, but other people are as well. And I think we should be looking towards enhancing and distributing light wherever it is needed, rather than spending our time, which a lot of people in our genre do. I mean, I look at some of the Facebook pages, and I'm aghast.
Well, I think part of what you're hitting on, I want to jump in here, Stephen. I'm getting better. Stevens.
You'll get that right one day.
You have to have some humility when I can respect people having their opinion, even if it's different than mine, that they support this party or candidate or this set of policies or whatever. But you have to have the humility that there might be stuff you don't know, that some of your information might not be accurate or it might not be the whole picture. But the problem is people get so entrenched, right? So you can't just have a conversation of like, well, I think, to take Biden and Trump, I think Biden's good because of this, and the other person thinks Trump's good because of that. Like, the problem is people are so attached to these sides or these sort of ideological or tribal fixations that you can't have a kind of constructive intellectual conversation where you can actually have a real interchange that leads to something harmonious. I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah, they're identified.
Conflicted emotional level. And you can feel the way you feel about things, but how did the Tibetan put it? You have to ride loose in the saddle, right? When you come up with something and it's like, oh, the guy I really like in power, oh, he's actually doing something that's not good, and somebody presents you with the evidence of it, you got to be willing to take a step back and think, oh, maybe it's not like that. And if people had that attitude, we could have more easy political conversations. But politics has become so sort of tribalized and emotionalized. And I think there's value, like you were saying, Steve, to focus on invoking the energies. And if that's the direction you're being led in, then you should focus on that and not worry about arguing with people on Facebook about, this or that issue, because,
No, an esotericist should not be identified politically. Can have an
Yes,
interest, but
that's
not
right.
identified. They've focused in their soul alignment. Just to be in soul alignment is your service to humanity.
The masters are not Democrats or Republicans, trust me. They're neither.
so
It's
getting
an
back,
absurdity.
is there any more you guys want to say on this topic? I think I might actually cut this out and just have it as a separate video. But if it was prophetic, Cyrus, that comment you made. But
I would like to add one thing that our
sure.
co-worker Tilly from Slovenia mentioned. He was somebody long time ago. Somebody mentioned political stuff right before one of our meditations, and Tilly Aristide, he mentioned that event, Cyrus, that you were talking about when the disciples were praying, and they were praying and they were meditating on Hitler and sending them a lot of love. And reportedly, Master DK said, "Do not send them love; it's gonna make them stronger. Just send them light, light, light." So if you ever wanna try to send something to a politician that you don't like, then don't send them love, send them light.
Yeah, I would never be bothered with that, but
No, I don't do that. I think that's a type of a black man. It's not my place. I don't see the whole world. Truth is like the multifaceted jewel. You see only one side. And I don't want to waste my energy on that.
Well, you should meditate on, what your soul is guiding you to.
Correct.
So I'm sure
But many
there's somebody
people,
out there who probably is being led to send certain energies to politicians, and that's their dharma or whatever. But you got to focus on whatever your thing is and where.
I agree with everything, but the problem is there are some groups, some very well-known groups in our genre who actively don't do that. I'm very disappointing. These are Bailey students,
yeah.
and they are normally on the left, and they actively support left politicians by holding meditations based on DK teachings, and it's abhorrent to me, and I think it's part of the left-hand path, and I've had a lot of problems with these people,
I
I
think
didn't
it's
even know
creating a
they
huge.
exist.
I think it's creating
Again?
actually.
I said I don't even know they knew that they exist until you just mentioned it. So
Yeah,
I'm
unfortunately.
so far removed from everything, I don't get involved. So
I
just
do
in
believe.
conversation here. But
Uh,
it's hard to change oneself. How can one think they can change the flow of destiny and others? That's a huge arrogance. And it shows that they don't understand the teaching and that they can be used. The Master KH in the Mahatma letters says probationers and aspirants and disciples are influenced by, he used the term dukpas, which is the left-hand path, much more than they think. Because they're not conscious, dreaming that they are conscious, thinking that they are conscious, right? And that's why I said earlier, there are very few real disciples, not million. There are many in potential and probationers, but not yet disciples, not yet at that level. Many believe they are, but they are far from it. But that's part of the glamour that imprisons people, that they don't see correctly. And the work of the disciple is to align with their soul. When you take part in Wesak, not only are you helping your soul, but you are taking part in a hierarchical event You are moving your karma, your spiritual karma, in alignment with a planetary yearly event. And if you do it more often, you're affecting your spiritual destiny, not only in this life, but in future lives. And that's very important. But to think that you can change others is, and how many can change themselves? How many can let go of their negative bad habits, negative emotions? How many have achieved ahimsa? Tibetan masters spent several pages on ahimsa, to be harmless towards others. So many people, when they put their posts, and I even watch myself when I put a post, are just thinking, well, look, here am I. I am serving. I am helping. That's an illusion. Most of it is just an expression of one's spiritual ego, wanting praise, wants how many likes you're going to get, no comments you're going to get.
You mean my everything is nothing post? That's not
Yeah,
doing it for people? I'm not changing the world?
everything. Right? It's
The
like
point
once there
is,
was, I'm
it's
sorry?
most of what happens in this world, in the incarnate world, is temporary. It's the illusion of separateness that dogs disciples. It's all temporary, all of it. We are here just for 70, 80 years. You know, we get so worked up over this politician or that politician or this group or that group that we lose sight of the basis of discipleship sometimes. And that's why DK said that the thing that's stopping the externalization is disciples, not the masses of humanity. The masses of humanity are ignorant. They don't know any better. So, but the disciples should know better and shouldn't get involved in these incarnate activities, but they continue to do so. And the worst thing is groups, esoteric groups do it too, and that's very disappointing.
Yeah, and I would say that because of the more power they have, they add so much more to the, world glamour and these thought forms, creating thought forms that are completely unnecessary with
Yeah.
these meditations, and it's just creating more problem.
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest groups in the USA does that,
Which big
unfortunately.
group is that? You know,
Well,
these, I
but
don't know any of them. What?
We will edit
he can
it
tell
out.
you afterwards. We don't need to throw it
Okay,
all.
you don't want it recorded. Sorry, that makes
Oh
sense.
no, I don't. I don't think it would be. I don't think it's very charitable of me to
Yeah.
have it publicly.
But let's cut the I don't know how we would phrase it, the political conversation here. And I'll put this probably in a separate video. Maybe I'll leave it in. Um, and then let's move back to Wesak. Okay.
Good idea.
It was good conversation. I like that, I'm getting two videos for one here essentially. Um, but yeah, one thing I wanted to ask was people's experiences of Wesak. But before we get into that, is there any more points on the distribution of energy or anything related to that people want to go into?
I would like to say one thing. When Buddha comes for those 8 minutes, Maitreya, is it two other masters, is it Kutumi and Amoria, they create the triangle. And in the middle of the triangle is a crystalline bowl with this like crystalline watery like liquid that gets blessed and absorbs that energy. And it's part of that transformation process. So as above, so below, the importance of triangles.
Yes.
So,
Triangles have saved humanity, in my opinion.
Well,
yeah,
and there's
But
a stepping down of energy there too, because they've got that triangle. The
correct,
three of them receive the energy. There's a group there. It's not the Christ all by himself. And then
correct,
they step it down to everybody else.
correct.
DK's made it clear that triangles, and it's the smallest group formation on the earth is triangles, isn't it? And he's made it very clear that in the future Aquarian age, it is group work that will be the succession and the externalization process, not individuals.
that's
That's
why
the
I've always
Piscean
been involved with group works for, well, it's been since 1975. It's a long time when I started. But when we have our Wesak ceremony, we always have a bowl with water And when we chant the Buddha mantra and we make food offerings, have a ritual, do like similar what they would do in that valley. And then the water is uh, given to everybody who partakes. I've had about 5 uh, Wasaks where I had for the public. I don't have it at the exact time for the public. I do that for myself and my inner group. But for the public, I usually have it a few hours later or whatever. But then people seem to enjoy it. For the last few years, we've had about 30 people come for a Wesak. And it's really beautiful having them all chant to the Buddha mantra. And first, we pay obeisance to the masters who are there. And then we pay obeisance to Lord Maitreya. And then we begin chanting the Buddha mantra and do so many rounds of that, and then finish with the great invocation. And then we pass the water around to everyone because the water we would receive on the altar. So we build an altar, usually have a fairly nice sized Buddha, and people seem to really enjoy it. And there's usually a downpour. Many people can feel something touching them at the top of their head. They feel something going on. For myself, if you read my book, Living on the Inner Edge, I discuss a group of Wasaks, and I had some of my best spiritual experiences during Wasak. And even in the last few years, most Wasaks, I always have some, how would you call it, very special experience. Not every Wasak. Sometimes I find myself starting the Wasak meditation and, oh, I want to have there's a thought going through me wants to have an experience. But it's when I don't think of it, and something usually happens that was quite magnificent. I can't even find the words for them, but usually I learn a great deal through the Wesak event. One of the Wasaks in my book, who I mentioned, my teacher, we would meditate every 4 hours. And the Wesak at that year was somewhere like 2 a.m. And so we'd sleep, wake up, meditate, sleep, and wake up, then went to sleep at somewhere like 10 p.m. and then woke up just before 2 p.m. before 2 a.m. and then meditated. And then there's an 18-hour cycle related to Wesak, and then catch that same cycle, 2 more meditations. And I have a slight psychic ability, but it was magnified tremendously during this Wesak, those type of events. That was back in 1980 or something like that. So yeah, it's usually very, very, I always look forward to Wesak. That's why I prepare for it for 6 months, because it's well worth the experience. And people were disciplined enough. Wesak requires discipline, focus, and determination to persevere. And I'm very surprised, and I know you guys may. I once went back, I don't know how many years, it's got to be 20 odd years, and took part in a Wesak Lucis Trust in New York. I was so disappointed. One, because I can sense many things. There was nothing. And I never understood why they don't chant to the Buddha, because the Buddha is coming. You invoke the Buddha through his mantra. And I've been doing that for 25 years. And I know some other initiates. I know a few, I met a couple of very unusual beings, have unusual abilities, which really surprised me. They never heard of Alice Bailey. They never heard of Theosophy. Their knowledge actually directed them towards Alice Bailey and tried to get them to read it. But their knowledge is they remember from their past lives. They've got their own knowledge, and they're connected to the Theosophical masters, none of which say, read Alice Bailey. So there might be a big shock with these when they get much older. and the teaching, just like Alice Bailey when she wrote what is Initiations Humans in Solar, and came to, I forget who it was at in California, the what is it, the Theosophical Society there, and she said this was
Crotona.
from, yeah, Crotona, thank you. And this was from the Master DK. Well, it can't be. You haven't been given the right through Annie Besant and Leadbeater. How can you be in touch?
Oh, no, it wasn't DK. It was she saw a portrait of Kudhumi on the wall, and she just blurted out, "Oh, he must be
Oh,
my master. I've met him before,"
okay. So
because she hadn't
anyway,
seen it before.
but she had the
Yeah.
book, she had the manuscript, or had, because the Theosophical Society published it initially. Isn't that correct? Or
No,
am I-
no, no, no.
Didn't-
They published a few parts
Oh, just parts in the magazine?
in the magazine, yes,
I'm sorry. Okay, so I misinterpreted. But
but not
then,
much.
yeah, but didn't
And
they?
then, and sorry, go on.
So no, correct me if I'm wrong, because my history. Did they not refute the fact that she was in touch with the masters?
Well, this is a lot. I'm happy to go into it, but I'm a bit of a nerd on this stuff, I'm afraid.
And just in general, just in general,
Well, they
Steve.
kicked her out.
In general terms, what happened was that the first book she wrote was actually not Initiation Human and Solar. That's a common mistake people make. It was Letters on Occult Meditation.
That's what I actually thought.
Yeah, yeah. But Lucy's Trust claims it's Initiation Human and Solar, but that's incorrect. But what happened was she tried to take over some of the Lucy's Trust, and she put forward Foster to be the president of the Theosophical Society in America against a guy called Rogers, and he lost like hugely. This guy Rogers won the election, and Rogers then removed them from the society. That's what
Okay,
happened.
but where did I read that about? They didn't accept the fact that she was
No,
in
what
touch
you're
with
saying
the
was in her
masters.
autobiography, where she saw that painting, she said, "Oh, he must be my master." And then, like you were saying, it's like, well, you're not at this level and you haven't done this, so you can't be in touch with the masters.
So
Oh,
the only reason I'm bringing that up is that's may happen again in the future.
Oh, yeah.
that's sort of correct, but what happened was that she wrote the first book, and you are correct, Joshua, that she went into the shrine room and saw a picture of KH, and she says, "Oh, that is my master. I've met him." That's what she said. It's true, right? But I don't think that was the reason she was kicked out. She was kicked out because they tried to promote Foster into the position of being national secretary, and he
Yeah,
lost
that's
the
something
election.
else.
But I agree with your point, Cyrus, that people are too attached to the form as it is. For instance, the Bailey writings. When the new light comes through, or new prophets, avatars, serving disciples, whatever you want to call them, when they come in with new light and it doesn't fit exactly in the container you've already got, you gotta, you know, you gotta break that container and make a new one or adapt it to the new teachings or the new light.
Right, and that's what happened with Theosophy. Old Theosophists didn't want to accept the Bailey teaching. I remember when I first started, people would come up with the most unusual arguments why the Bailey teaching wasn't Theosophy, but it is Theosophy, and the same could happen in the near future. These very young, much younger than we are, by 30 years, give or take, start to eventually to give their presentation. It may, and they may be guided by the Master DK, KH, who knows, but it may be very different. And those that are caught still, well, no, that's not Alice Bailey. That's not, no, but this is what came through the conclave. They're inspired, and it's going to take shape. My feeling, did you want to say something,
Well,
Steve?
I
Go
want to
ahead.
clarify. I think it's worth clarifying something. Is that don't forget that the Agni Yoga Society also was very anti-Bailey,
Yes.
and
I'm not
DK.
saying, listen, I'm just going to, not anti-Bailey, just not acquainted. There's a difference between
No,
not being
no, no,
acquainted and
no. Helena Rowick called Bailey evil.
She
no, I'm talking
overstated
about
it.
Agni. I'm not talking about Agni. I'm talking these people in the future. They're not.
I'm talking about Agni Yoga.
Yeah, Agni Yoga, I can understand. That's Agni Yoga. They're another group. I don't know. I met what's her face in New York many years ago, the Russian lady who was the disciple of the Roriks and set up the what is it, the Rorik Museum in New York. I forgot her name. Sin something. So.
Cinda Fosdyke was it?
Yeah, her.
Cinda Fosdyke, yeah.
Yeah. And she didn't have any knowledge. Nothing. I met some other disciples years and years ago, and I was surprised at the lack of their knowledge. But anyways, that's something. But the people in the future, not
Right.
being against Bailey, just not being knowledgeable of the books, maybe knowledgeable of Alice Bailey or on the inner planes the same masters, because Master DK, KHM, etc., they're very active. Master R especially is very active. As I wrote in my first book in 2018, my first experience with Master R was in 1978. I've had a long relationship based from that long period. Very active presently. So, but the new teaching may take a different form. What I was going to say, I don't know, interested in your opinions, in Glamour, in the last several chapters, the Master DK gives out, he calls them formulas. Formulas for change. Master DK's genius. He's using a word formula, but in fact, it's a ritual. But the fact the word ritual has a negative connotation to it. People think of the occult in the wrong way. But, and then you had the Golden Dawn involved with a lot of rituals, and a lot of things went wrong with that. But if you have a soul alignment and understand the rituals the Master DK gave out, or these formulas, they can formulate a whole new psychology of change in the, how would you call it, astral substance of the individual through the use of these formulas or rituals that he put down in Glamour to end Glamour. That's just my little prophecy. Might be right, might be wrong, but they are very interesting. When I first read Glamour years ago, I didn't, but when I read it recently with my group, we went over it, and then holy moly, these are really interesting. And he doesn't put it there for nothing.
No, but the stage of the Forerunner is now over.
Now, there can be advanced beings.
Yeah, but the stage of the Forerunner is
What do
technically
you
over
mean,
now.
forerunner?
Sorry?
What do you mean by forerunner?
Well, in Bailey's teaching, she talks about the stage of the Forerunner.
Right.
She says it finishes in 2025.
Right. So then there's the third stage.
The third stage
advanced
coming.
initiates.
The third stage is coming. That's right. Yes.
Right. And that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but we don't know the form of that yet, Cyrus.
No, I was just giving my prophecy.
Oh, DK tried that.
Yeah,
But we have to be open to whatever packaging the truth comes in, or the new wave of truth, or however you want to put it.
That's what I'm saying in that book.
It'll be group
And
work.
if you think of it, if the masters are very intelligent, I guess they would diversify their investments. It's not. I don't think it's going to be one person like Alice Bailey. I think it's going to be many more, and different. It's going to be different race, and then the teachings will go through different, bodies, so they will have slightly different flair. So I think it's also, training for humanity, recognize the message, don't focus on small details that separate us, like Joshua said. I love that. Focus on what unites the teachings, what unites all these people, the synthesizing.
More synthesis.
Yeah.
It'll be group work. That's what it'll be.
I think it's going to be group work too. I think it's going to be very interesting.
It'll be practical, won't it, Daniela? It'll be practically based, in my opinion. It'll be practice.
That's what we do exactly in the group that I have but we synthesize Vajrayana Buddhism, Yoga Sutras, Theosophy, Gurdjieff Fourth Way, only certain parts of it, We blend it together into a practical psychology. The basis is the Tibetan master, but there's things that are, I don't say missing, the Tibetan master hints at that I incorporate a lot more in order to do Atma Vichara, or self-inquiry, or to create a new psychology based on yoga, 7 rays, and this idea that came out of Gurdjieff but is related to yoga about the multiplicity of eyes that are active in a human being, not one ego, but a multiplicity of egos that are in constant activity. So, for instance, you ask a friend to do something and they agree, and then later you come back and they haven't done it. What it is one ego in them agrees to be nice, and there's another ego who doesn't want to do it, doesn't do it. It just depends which I or ego they listen to. So it's the same. You want to do a discipline. I'm going to meditate 3 times a day, going to read for a half an hour or an hour, blah, 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 whatever, and be vegetarian. And all of a sudden, before you know it, you're having a hot dog or what have you, or a hamburger, because the ego that said they wanted to do this, this, and that, countered by another ego that doesn't want to. And not being conscious, you shift. And you don't understand the forces or the energies, as we were talking earlier. There's first force, and there's always a second force, which is the force of resistance. And then the work, the esoteric work, is a third force that overcomes and helps the initial force. When you made up your mind, I want to meditate, or I want to do this, I want to study, I want to take part in Wesak. You know how many people I had? One guy said, oh, you're doing letters and occult meditation. Great. I went and bought the book. I've read 50 pages. So when's the first meeting? Oh, it's going to be on this date. Oh, but there's a concert on that date. So there's one ego that wants it, sincere, but there's a much bigger ego that went to the concert and never came, even though he read 50 pages. That is practical psychology, is understanding how to deal with the forces that affect that aspect of one's being. And through that, you become conscious. It's the Tibetan master used, that's the Kurukshetra, the battle of the astral plane. Very difficult.
I think
And
it's
that's
not
the
just
difficult, pardon?
it's not just the astral plane. There's physical body that has its needs. There's astral body. There's mental body. So
But
all
it's
of
the
them.
astral that drives everything. You'd be surprised. And generally, if you're at least a probationary, and past the first initiation, you have a certain ability to control your physical body. Should have. It's not that difficult, unless you have some physical challenges and stuff. But you should be a lot of the aspirants today are incarnations of past spiritual beings, yogis, what have you, have already been on the path. And so some of that is already done and has already been passed. But right now it's understanding the astral body, and then of course the mental body, the the motions of the mind and the motion of thought and how that functions. And people don't have much understanding. And the esoteric teaching is the way to learn, especially the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. That's why the Master DK has a whole book on that. Is they are how would you call it? Is the first self-help book probably was ever written.
So getting back to Wesak, Cyrus, you shared some of your experience with that. Stephen and Daniela, do you want to share some experiences you've had with Wesak?
No, not really. I mean, there's nothing special has ever happened to me on Wesak. I respect the approach to Buddha and the teachings, but I want to re-emphasize that this year it's about the 100-year conclave, not just Wesak. It's really about this wonderful opportunity we have of changing our world that we live in through group service. I keep coming back to that. That is what's going to change humanity. We've had triangles in the past. Now we've got 12s and other things happening, and that will be the thing that saves humanity, in my opinion. And that's the way that the world is changing. The esoteric world is changing into being more practical. I don't think that the third phase of the teaching is going to be about books. It's going to be about actually doing something about it. And there's far too many in our genre who don't do anything. They just sit there and they might know Bailey back to front and be a lot better students of Bailey than I am. But they don't do anything with it. So it's a complete waste of time. Book learning is not going to change the world. Practical compassion will change the world, in my opinion.
Books have a lot. The books of theosophy changed a lot of the thought of humanity and helped bring in the spiritual, esoteric world. So it had its effect. But the thought forms and people reading them, that's...
No, I understand that. I understand that. But you can have a book on how to maintain your car, right? But if you read the book and you understand how to change a carburetor, and the car breaks down, and you don't change the carburetor, then the book has been completely useless to you, hasn't it?
Yeah, but books help change thought forms. And the deeper teaching has to do with changing the thought form of humanity. For instance, give an example. It's going to take ages, but a lot of people, and I know you seem to like talking about the dark forces. So the dark forces apply ancient Atlantean magic through advertising. Advertising is very esoteric, but people are unconscious. Advertising uses color, form, and sound, all the basis of mantra. So you have a jingle, Coke is life, or I used to like, what was that one? If you saw that movie with Stallone and what's her name singing about the hot dog, whatever, the American Open. I forget. Anyways, I forgot. Those jingles are actually mantras that impregnate the astral, mental, lower mental aspect of humanity and create the need for desire, and build the greater desire that again feeds the lunar petri, the lower self. Thus, humanity, until humanity can break through some of that. So maybe, as Stephen was saying earlier about how things are in such turmoil, that turmoil may have to go, and the Tibetan master does mention, if I don't remember that there may be some sort of catastrophe. Doesn't he say something like that, Stephen?
Yes.
Yes, so there may be something in order to break this hold. And if man physically suffers, it's the soul that counts. If our societies break down and there's, like during war, when places are devastated, or like we see in Gaza, it's terrible. The ruins there and everything. If that ever happened here in some respect, but it would break the hold of all this power of media, advertising, our comforts. Part of the reason people don't do things is they want to be comfortable.
That's right. That's right. And
if I told you had to do that, go ahead.
The other problem is that the sixth ray rules America. That's another problem.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I missed that. The
sixth ray is the ray of America, and that's part of the problem, because America has this crusade to save the world, and that's why it has 800 military bases all over the world. It seems to think that whatever happens in a far-off nation, it must save it, and that's the sixth ray trait.
But that's what it's going through, and it might change and become more Aquarian.
Well, it's already changing. There's already this backlash against getting involved in all these wars, and
Yes, and
that's
that's very good news, Joshua.
And backlash, to a point, backlash against materialism in your generations,
Yes,
to a
yes,
degree, you know,
yes. But but
That's
but
true.
but you know,
to a
America
degree.
has this illusion that it runs the world.
Yes, exactly. I
You
think there
know,
was
And
something, I know again, we're talking, Jimmy Carter wrote something to Trump before he passed away. I saw it online. What's the difference between China and the United States? Why does China have super fast rail systems? The United States doesn't. Blah, blah. Many, how do you call comparisons? Because China is not trying to change the world. It's the United States is spending so much on armaments and creating, as you were just saying, bases all over the. China doesn't have bases in other countries.
no, it
well,
doesn't. No.
it does, but very few.
Yeah,
I
but
think
it's
Very
about
not
few.
the
one.
And
United
same
States.
with Russia. Russia has, I think it's like 20 bases, and I think America has 850, something like that.
Anyways,
Because I mean,
it's all that
it's
money.
trying to control everybody.
It's all
Next
that
problem is going to
money.
be Iran.
You know, it's
All
all
right,
that.
so I'd like to wind the video
Yeah.
down. We've gone very long. But does anybody have any closing thoughts or things they want to share related to WESAC?
Daniela, you've not said much about Wesak. Come on.
well, you know, Vesak is a wonderful opportunity for all of us to, regardless of level of our evolution or spiritual achievement or soul contact, to do something, make a change.
Yes.
And group work is always recommended. You know, you're safer for an individual and more powerful. And I personally had very special experiences during Vesak. I only started celebrating it in the past 7 years when I got involved with the pranic healing. Very, very special experiences. So it is real. It is very powerful. And I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I'm very excited about our meeting in Thailand. I'll meet Stephen in person. Very
Yes.
excited about that.
So you guys have a sort of private closed group WESAC meeting you're going to, but Cyrus, you have one that's open to the public, at
Yeah,
least
I've always
online.
followed what the master DK says to try and bring it to the public.
Yeah.
Now, the first one I did, I got about 7 people. I can remember. I rented a place. A few people, I was surprised actually came, other than the few that I knew. But last year I had about 28 or 29. I don't know. This year, the last full moon meditations, I'm averaging about, it was 21 last month and about 20 the month before. So I'm hoping for the public.
And so
uh,
if people are interested in participating in that, whether in person or online, what's the best way to reach out to you about that?
well, the they can go through the Northern School of Esoteric Wisdom website. They can go Facebook, Northern School of Esoteric Wisdom, our Facebook events. It's there on the events. And we
Okay,
rent
we'll
a place.
put links to that in the video description.
Yeah, so we rent a place.
Yeah. Let me clarify something. Our group is open to everybody, including all the public, and anybody can come to our group and take part. What we're asking for in Thailand, we've got over 40 people coming. What we're asking for is people who've had experience of doing 12s rather than us sit there and spend the first 4 days of the 5 days teaching them the basics of 12s. So that was the only reason that we said that we didn't want Joe Blogs from the local corner store to turn up. But
And so if
we're,
people, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, but we're also doing Zooming online, so we're expecting to get 100 or more that way. But anybody's invited to join 12s. So I don't want it to appear to be some sort of a secret society, a Masonic thing, because it isn't.
Okay, and what's the
Everybody.
best way for people to reach out if they're interested in being a part of the 12s?
Oh God, there's many ways. We've got YouTube channels, we've got books, we've got website.
Okay, well,
Facebook.
you tell me and I'll put the links in the description of the video and people can check those out.
A long list. Yeah.
I hope you
Yeah,
get rid
but
of
so,
it.
so we are open to everybody. I don't want to appear to be secret societies. Because we're not.
I would say also people should follow their heart and their intuition, whatever they're drawn to, they should
Yeah.
join that group.
That's right, yes.
I personally, I used to meditate every year with pranic healers, wonderful meditations, very, very powerful. Huge groups in person and online. But this year I'm very, very excited about being part of the 12s. So,
All right. Well, and if Daniela gives me any links to the pranic healing stuff, I'll put that in the description and people can check that out too.
oh, thank you.
But yeah, if you made it this far in the video, please leave a like on it, share with somebody you think might appreciate it, and consider subscribing for more interesting conversations. Closing thoughts, anybody?
Just thank you for inviting us.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it was fun.
Until next time, this is Josh's Magic. Thank you, Daniela, Stephen, and Cyrus for coming on. And everybody, I hope it's a productive and spiritually connected Wesak.
Namaste.
Namaste.